Good morning. I watched something last night that it's a bit chilly actually. Sun's not yet up, it's about 5:30. So I seem to have acquired tennis elbow, even though I don't bloody play tennis. I watched something last night that was not easy viewing. A very gritty and honest on the ground documentary broadcast by the Ukrainian Foreign Legion. There were men from Ireland, the UK, America, Turkey, Scandinavia, who are all fighting for the Ukraine in the Ukraine. Several of them were injured. They are literally fighting through rubble and fields of sunflowers, while drones of the type we see in our local parks are flying overhead and trying to drop grenades on them. Airburst mortar rounds, incoming machine gun fire. In the second half of this documentary, they lost a man. You could see the bloodstains on their uniforms. None of them showed their faces for obvious reasons. Man, if I had a monthly income, I would be donating money towards those boys. But I don't. So I urge anyone who has an interest to look up Ukrainian Foreign Legion on YouTube. Watch, and if you can, donate towards them. Or if you are more pacifist inclined, donate towards some of the civilian charities that help out civilians and the orphans of this war. Either way, I mean, months ago there was in my mind the idea of going out and fighting myself, but I realised I have no military training. I'd just be cannon fodder. I would die a pointless death. You know, I think I would be a lot more capable than I look on paper, but but just like in my life currently, I'd never get the chance to prove myself because on paper I look like nothing. But that's a background thought. But to see, this was filmed 3 weeks ago, but to see the ongoing conflict there through the eyes of the soldiers who are fighting it was rather intense. I have no words to describe what I watched. Just intense, uncomfortable. And occasionally funny. Very occasionally. It's like the Asian American lad who was injured, called CB. Before it all kicked off, he was sitting with a couple of, I think they were Ukrainian snipers or Ukrainian engineers, watching. Look, he was looking at them, and they were eating buckwheat. And he was like, "Hey, what's up?" And the guy's like, "Huh? So why is it you guys eat so much buckwheat?" And the Ukrainian just looked at him blankly and then said, "Well, have you seen it? It fucking grows everywhere." And he's like, "Oh, okay, that's why you eat so much buckwheat." And I think that, to me, is your typical, from what I've seen and heard, typical Ukrainian blunt sense of humour. And, you know, bluntness is something I'm very familiar with. My good friend Sarah down at Ipswich Community Hub made me laugh yesterday. Ed. So she got some lunch. And he looked at her and said, "Oh, what you got there for lunch?" And she just looked at him, completely straight faced, and said, "It's a sandwich." And he was like, "I know, what kind of sandwich?" And she just burst out laughing. Back to the main subject. I noticed there's been widespread reports of Russian drone incursions into Romania and Latvia. These, to my mind, do not look intentional. Thus far, they look like strays, which was inevitable and bound to happen. You know, am I giving Russia the benefit of the doubt here? Yes, in a certain way, because the Russian war machine has proved itself to be mildly incompetent, and that's saying that's under exaggerating. Expecting some, barely qualified Russian lad to know exactly where the border between Romania and Ukraine is, or the border between Belarus and Latvia. Well, accidents happen at the best of times in war. We've seen it. The shelling of your own side inevitably happened throughout the history of artillery. Accidental targeting of civilians has always happened. Mind you, the Russians are doing it intentionally. Glide bombs are an horrific thing. The more I see of this war, the more I wish I could do something, and maybe that's why I'm making this video. I once again urge anyone who has good financial backup to at least donate to the civilian charities that are helping the Ukrainian civilians. If you really want to put your money where your mouth is, donate towards the Ukrainian Foreign Legion or any other source that are actually fighting in the Ukraine. There's There's a British lad connected to Laserpig and Animarchy History, who is out there manufacturing drones for the Ukraine. I think if you're looking on Laserpig or Animarchy History, you'll be able to find information on perhaps how you could donate towards that particular end of it if you wish. The cheap, inexpensive drone has become such a fundamental factor in this war. Apparently the Russians, and probably the Ukrainians too, have ones called droppers. They're just cheap, inexpensive drones that are just large enough to be able to carry a hand grenade, and they will hover above and drop it on you. They were attempting to shoot these things down as they saw them. You could even see the speck in the sky of them where they're going, fucking shoot it now. Quite terrifying. They're dropping improvised explosives and grenades down, tunnels under ruined houses and garages. And as I said, weirdly, they're crawling through the most beautiful fields of sunflowers amidst the rubble and other beautiful blooming plants. There is so much greenery. The Ukraine is a beautiful country, and it's being ravaged. And the same places are being fought over. Kursk, Operation Citadel, World War II. Pokrovsk was Prokrovka, site of another major battle. And apparently Putin's Kremlin have used this to draw comparisons and yet again aim accusations of fascism at the Ukrainian government. Specifically, German fascism, which I find hilarious as their president is Jewish. I understand there were unconfirmed rumours that a certain nasty little mustachioed Austrian corporal had a Jewish great-grandmother or something, but that's by the by. Russia's rhetoric has become increasingly desperate of late. I understand both sides will use propaganda and will over-exaggerate or under-exaggerate. That's propaganda for you. I understand that the Ukrainians will do this just as much as the Russians will do. But I know whose side I'm on. Let's face it, the Ukrainian military and government was just as corrupt, almost as corrupt as the Russian. That is testament to the old Soviet Union, which was heavily corrupt. But somehow Ukraine, with Western backing, has, perhaps to a certain extent, managed to clean house. Certainly its military machine is operating far better than Russia's. But they still have the disadvantage of numbers. I view the only hope as being the lack of progress making Putin's regime unpopular enough. Because, yeah, very well-informed video I watched on another YouTube channel, The Military Show. At the moment, how Putin's regime is doing it is they are drafting from the poorest and most arsehole end of nowhere of Russian territories. That's where they're recruiting their soldiers from. They are literally giving these guys a signing bonus of 3 times the Russian minimum wage or something like that. And what are they going to do? They are trying not to recruit from the Moscow, St. Petersburg area, urban European Russia, where there would probably be protests against conscription. He needs to keep the intelligentsia and middle classes of Moscow and St. Petersburg, and probably indeed Kaliningrad, their enclave on the Baltic. He needs to keep those people contented and away from the war for as long as possible. The real point of trouble will be when he has no other choice, when they have no other choice. Because the Russians are taking such devastating losses, not that the Ukraine aren't taking devastating losses too, and therein lies the problem. Ukraine obviously has a tiny population compared to Russia. The Russian Federation is still vast. And then you've got Latvia, Estonia and Lithuania basically turning around to Germany principally and saying, look, we want to put boots on the ground in the Ukraine because we know we're next. If Ukraine falls, we're next. They know it. And this has been something that Putin has stated time and time again. He wants the return of the old borders of the Soviet Union. This obviously includes the Baltic countries. And you can bet if the 3 Baltic states do this, Poland will back them. And Finland will as well. Because Finland knows they're in Putin's sights. The Poles know they're in his sights as well. I have no information on how the Romanian government feels about this. They've certainly protested vehemently about these drone incursions. But as I said, I'm willing to believe these could just be a matter of incompetence and just the fog of war. Even with all these eyes in the sky and modern technology, the fog of war still exists. You saw that in this video. They were having to identify where the enemy were by where the rounds were coming in from. I didn't fully watch the second one because it got too much. When they lost a man who was interviewed in the first one, covered faces obviously, that just hit me. I thought, this is really happening right now. This was recorded 3 weeks ago. These people are getting wounded and dying less than a month ago. Fighting in the front lines of the Ukraine. I also watched a video about a week ago, no, about 2 or 3 days ago, sorry, a bit confused, on a young woman who's become known as the Joan of Arc of the Ukraine. She's a sniper. Very glamorous middle-class Ukrainian. She apparently trained with a rifle from about the age of 8. Had her first proper rifle at about 12. Her father's influence, apparently. But in 2014, when Russia invaded and took over the Ukraine, the Crimea, they asked her if she wanted to join the military. She said no. She wanted the glamorous life of going to university in Kyiv, and she became a successful businesswoman running her own jewelry online store, which is where she got her nickname of Emerald. Very glamorous, sophisticated young lady. But when Russia invaded the Ukraine, she got a phone call and she said, yes, I'm going to the front lines with my rifle. And while she was there, she met a young man who also served in the Ukrainian military, and they got married, and she is currently pregnant, but still in the front line. They will take her off the front line compulsorily about a month before she is due to give birth. Ukrainian women are fighting too. That's an important thing to note. The whole people are fighting against the Russians in whatever way they can. And this is something to be admired. Mind you, what else do you do? I just wish there was something I could do, and maybe making this video is the thing I can do. I yet again urge you to look into the details and find, if you've got the disposable income, a charity to support, whether it's supporting Ukrainian civilians or directly supporting the Ukrainian military. I'm not saying they're all the good guys, they're not. But they're on my darn sight more inclined to believe that they're on the side, they're kind of on the light grey side of things than the Russians are. Not that there are poor Russian soldiers who are fighting in the front line have any clue why they're there. This is all the oligarch regime led by Putin. Not every Russian in Russia is a fan of Putin. Some are. We cannot afford to look at everything in black and white these days. It's a very complicated world. If you do look at everything in black and white, you're doing the situation a disservice. You're not really seeing the full picture. I may finish watching that video at some point today. It was a little bit overwhelming. But I urge you to watch it. And to watch anything else you can on what's happening in the Ukraine. And I urge you, wherever you are in the world, to perhaps contact your local MP or whatever dignitaries you have and ask what your government is doing to support the Ukraine. I certainly I'm thinking about doing something about that today, maybe through my local Labour councillor, who I've done some work with beforehand here in Ipswich. Maybe even possibly see when Jack Abbott's next surgery is. He's our local MP. Maybe even organise something myself. maybe like a lot of the items I've got that I wish to sell, from ornamental plates fired in St. Petersburg apparently, so that's a piece of Russian porcelain. Maybe I should break it. No, it's worth money. You know, I've got various other items, and I could donate some of the proceeds towards a charity, or towards procuring some military aid, even if it's just a backpack or medical equipment. Because that is the most I think I could do. Wasting my life would be pointless. I would rate my chances at between 5% and nil. 20 years ago would have been a different story, I think. And it saddens me. I feel like I'm too old to get involved. But I urge any of you with military experience to think seriously about it, especially if you have no ties, you know, no wife and kids. Yeah. Well, thanks for listening.